I have created
the most advanced AI soldier.
The wait is over. Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+.
We are looking for something you've discovered. And some of us will stop at nothing to get it.
Ready?
The countdown is complete.
There's no going back.
Our directive is clear.
Hang on!
Tron Ares now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, your new foundation. Use PDF spaces to generate a presentation. Grab your docs, your permits, your moves. AI levels up your pitch, gets it in a groove. Choose a template with your timeless cool. Come on now, let's flex those tools. Draft, design, deliver, make it sing. AI builds the deck so you can build that thing. Do that, do that, do that with Acrobat.
Learn more at adobe.com/do-that-with-Acrobat.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gavin. You join us for this week's opposition preview, and it's been a bit of a rush this one because, as you might not have noticed, we are playing in the Cup at this weekend, but we didn't know who we were playing up until Tuesday night, so getting things arranged in time for the game has been a bit of a rush, not just for the club, but for us here at How Are the Podcast. But still, I am very pleased to be joined by a special guest today, Phil Bowers from BBC Radio Stoke. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. How are you?
I'm really good, mate. I'm really good.
Good.
It's, like I said, it's been a bit of a rush. I mean, must have been a bit mad that on Tuesday night, because obviously, as people might not know, I don't know, but this game was due to have been played weeks ago, and because of the weather it wasn't, and I think with scheduling, that many midweek games and things like that, it's been difficult to get the game on any sooner than it already has been, and it went to extra time, so it kind of feels like a league game, this, doesn't it? Because you're sort of bleeding from one into the other. But that must have been a bit chaotic on Tuesday.
Oh, well, you wouldn't believe it. And so, as a bit of background to all this, so Vale's pitch has had some real trouble with it this season, which is
great.
part of the reason. Which is part of the reason why the original Bristol City game was delayed by pretty much a month, more or less. So, a month ago, the pitch was awful, and anyone listening to this, I'd ask them to go and watch the highlights of us losing to Stockport in the Virtue Trophy, just to see how bad it was, because it was like it had been bombed. It was awful. But so as a result of that, and as a result of Vale getting through in the trophy, so they got to the quarterfinals of the trophy, they've had games called off due to the weather pre-Christmas that they've been trying to fit in. They've pretty much been playing Saturday, Tuesday consistently, and a lot of those are home games. So the Bristol City game was on Tuesday because it was one of the few Tuesdays that they could actually fit it in. And it wasn't ideal, but I understood that the FA kind of said, you've got to play this before the fifth round, so you've got to squeeze this in somewhere. So it ended up being squeezed in. And to be fair to Vale, it probably came at the right time for them, because the last 3 or 4 games, they've actually upped their performance levels. Now, if you look at this on paper and go, oh, Vale are 10 points adrift at the bottom of the league, it's an uphill. Listen, if they escape from relegation, it'll be a miracle. But what John Brady, who's the manager, has gone and done, he's instilled a little bit more belief. He's got them playing on the front foot. What he found, though, is it was a squad set up to play a certain way and set up to play very defensively, and he's trying to change that and get them to play a lot more attacking. A lot of the players haven't found that. Mitigating circumstances, he's lost his top scorer and probably his best winger in January as well, because they didn't want to stay around at a team at the bottom of the league. So he's had a lot of spinning plates in the space of a month. And I think going into Tuesday, they'd started to put a bit of a run together, played well against Reading, won at Northampton, played well last weekend against Luton, probably deserved to win the game. And then going into Tuesday, people were going, well, they've been schooled in the Darren Moore style of football, which was let's keep them at bay for an hour and then hope that and then sling on 5 strikers and hope we can get a goal. A bit like playing FIFA. But John Brady's team kind of went, right, okay. The first couple of minutes, Bristol City were a little bit iffy. They were, hesitant on the ball, and you could see it. They went, all right, then we'll have a go at you. And they went at him. And, he made 4 or 5 changes. And that's the other thing now, is that in the past, when players were being brought on, they perhaps weren't up to speed and they weren't fit. And now he's got the players that he's brought in fit. So they're making an impact. He's rotating the squad a little bit to keep everybody fit. and we went at them. And I think the thing that surprised me is that the way that Bristol City kind of backed off them a lot and didn't really want to go and engage with the fight and didn't want to go and engage with the scrap. And once that happened, Vale kind of sniffed a bit of blood and thought, right, okay, we'll get into you. And fair play to Ben Waine, who I can talk at length about him because, and if you want, I'll go into a rather lengthy story about him in a bit, but fair play to him. This is a guy who earlier on in the season had been frozen out. His confidence was on the floor. He was seen a sports psychologist. He is a Newcastle fan, unfortunately for you lot. But he was really, really struggling mentally, wasn't in the team, missing sitters and everything. And fair play to the lad. Scored against Barnsley in the trophy just prior to December, hasn't looked back. And now you've got to put him as one of the first names on the team sheet because he has matured into a really dangerous player at this level.
Yeah, but that was interesting that with him. I saw the little interview at the end where he mentioned about his family being Newcastle fans, and obviously he gets the goal in the game. So there is that little added piece, isn't there, with him?
Yeah.
But, I mean, it just reminds me of when we were particularly in League One, because we seem to play against teams every week who had a Newcastle fan playing for them, and they always scored against us. And you can guess what they did as well. They also celebrated like Alan Shearer, put the hand in the air. So just when I heard that, I was like, oh, well, there's a little bit of extra bite about this one. But I just want to quickly go back to something you just said there, because you know, talking about basically not having pressure on you because you're kind of bottom and people are expecting you to go down anyways. We're seeing it in the Premier League with Wolves. Wolves have been marooned at the bottom of the table, and all of a sudden, it's almost like the pressure's lifted. Has there been that kind of feeling under John Brady where he's come in and it's like, well, everybody's expecting us to go down anyway, so let's just try and enjoy the rest of the season, pick up results, and if we can stay up, fantastic.
Well, yeah, and yes and no, I would say, because again, this is going into the context of Vale's season, which is is worth a telephone book's worth of a story itself. But I'll keep it brief. But basically, got promoted last season, wave euphoria, but it was built around really solid, strict, rigid football. And Laurent Talai, who's now at Plymouth, who was your maverick, who flew around the pitch like a man possessed, scored goals from outside the box, inside the box, headers, volleys, left foot, right foot, you name it, he could score it. We picked him up from Aldershot. The man was a revelation, and I wish we'd still got him now. But the club, he got a release clause, so Plymouth come and take him, and we replaced him with Devante Cole. Completely the wrong type of striker for the way we play, because all he does is sit in the box and wait to be given the ball. Completely different. There is a point to what I'm coming to here, so this is just giving you background. But so what's happened is that strict, rigid style of football was Darren Moore's kind of stock in trade, and he was very loath to deviate from that. But without Talai, he'd not got his maverick, he'd not got his Laurent Robert. For those Newcastle fans who might be listening to this, that perverse pleasure. But he'd not got that type of player who would be a maverick, and so as a result, the team got very static. This team got very, very boring, and if they went a goal behind, they couldn't come back because they were so stuck in their game plan. Fast forward, and people had, as you said, kind of accepted relegation when it came to January, but everybody thought Moore should have gone in November. He didn't, and it was at that point where natives get restless. People start to criticise the ownership, and they're like, what are we going to do? They sacked Darren Moore on Boxing Day, or just after Boxing Day. John Brady comes in 2 or 3 weeks later, right in the middle of the transfer window. And there was a kind of, we're down, we can't accept it. But people expected an upturn in form. It didn't exactly come. Cup form carried on, but the league form took a while to get going. But then all of a sudden, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, they've started to play. And people are going, well, I'd resign myself to going down. And now they're going, hold on a minute. It's 10 points. If we can win another 3, then it's down to 7. Or win another game, it's down to 7. Then we're only 4 points off Rotherham, who are the team just above us. And then all of a sudden, people have started to go, hold on a minute. And the only thing that might scupper this, Gav, is that, as I said to you, because of the games that have been postponed, that Vale now are literally playing every Saturday, Tuesday between now and the end of the season, because they've got that many games to cram in. And the thing that might do them is that they've picked up a lot of free agents in January, guys who haven't played football for a long time, and they are trying to get them fit. And they've got loanees in who are pretty inexperienced. And it's basically, without being horrible, it's like, right, we've got a plan. But sometimes when that plan doesn't work, let's just throw everything at it and see what works. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But you're right, there was almost an acceptance of there's no pressure on this. But the last kind of 3 games have made people go, hold on, we might be able to do this. And I think a lot of people mentally were going, well, we'll get beat on Tuesday and let's go to Peterborough and get something there on Saturday, which is where we should have been. And now, we've got an FA Cup 5th round tie to negotiate now. So, and the real issue, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way towards Sunderland at all, but the real issue is if Vale win FA Cup quarter-final weekend, as unlikely as that sounds, FA Cup quarter-final weekend is over Easter. And that would mean an away game at Cardiff and a home game with Rotherham to rearrange with no free Tuesdays left. So, it's maybe in Vale's best interest for you to knock them out. So,
well, I mean, we'd happily take that. Yeah, we're quite happy to progress. You've mentioned Darren Moore a couple of times there, and I just want to ask about him because he's somebody, I guess from afar, I've kind of admired some of the work he's done at other clubs, the most notable one being Chef Wed, where he, under all of the pressure that every manager's had there, with all the constraints of the ownership and the budgets and all that, he managed to do pretty well there. So I remember when he got that job at Port Vale thinking, that's a really good appointment for a team in League Two. Or did he get appointed just before relegation?
Yeah, he was appointed in League One, yeah.
Yeah, but stuck with the club in League Two, finished second last season. Obviously, I'm sure people were delighted with the job he did last season. So what's changed, from kind of, promotion, everything being so optimistic, jumping into League One and then struggling? Like, what was it about that transition he just couldn't manage? Because honestly, if I see like a top manager for that level struggling, I kind of scratch my head sometimes. I've done it with other managers like Ian Holloway and there've been countless others down the years who've maybe dropped into jobs and you go, oh, he's took a job where I wasn't expecting that, and then they struggle a bit. So what changed for Darren Moore over sort of that period?
Well, I think to understand that, you've perhaps got to drill down to both Darren Moore's history and also kind of where Vale are as a football club in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so the first of it was, Darren Moore got the job February 2024. As you say, big name. There was the only reservations people had at the time is that the club were we never interviewed anybody else. He was always our guy. And there was almost a feeling amongst the fan base of, well, why haven't we interviewed anybody else? It's almost like we're little old Port Vale. Darren Moore's come along to save the day. Why haven't we looked elsewhere other than just giving it to the first guy who knocked on the door, who'd got a big car, basically? And when he took over, they were still in a position to stay up. He only won 2 games of the 17 or 18, I think, he got left in charge. And there was almost a rationale of, well, it's not his squad. Nothing he could do about it. So give him the chance of the summer to rebuild. Now, this is where we get onto Darren Moore's kind of history. If you look at when Darren Moore manages, shall we say, a smaller club in the context of the league that he's in, so West Brom and Doncaster when he was in League One, his default position is rigid organisation, keep the team tight, don't give away goals. If you do give away a goal, you might as well start the car and go home. But when he's in charge of a Sheffield Wednesday with a huge budget for the league that they're in, and he can have a squad of 30-odd, and he can bring a player off the bench who scored 15 goals, he's laughing. And that was the scenario he found himself in with Vale in League Two. The owner, Carl Shanahan, gave him a really big budget. They brought in a lot of players. I've already mentioned Laurent Talai, who was his star player. Ronan Curtis, Jayden Stockley, George Byers, who has played in the Championship. Ben Hennigan played in League One in the Championship.
These are all names from our past. You're saying all these names and it feels like 2 minutes were coming up against Sunderland.
Ben Amos, who used to be at Manchester United. So brought all these players in. And, a lot of people looked at it and went, right, we've got some financial muscle in this league. And the only criticism that I think you could level at that team was they should have won the league given the expenditure that they've got. They were beaten to it by Doncaster on the last day of the season. But Darren Moore with a big budget is great. When he came up into the league above, obviously he's not got the biggest budget in the world. And so it kind of reverted to, right, lads, 10 men behind the ball, punt it to Talai, see what you can do. Well, Talai could do it, but we only had him for 4 games. And then he disappeared. And as I said to you then, it was Devante Cole. Right, okay, what do we do now? Give it to Devante. How do we get it to him? Well, we've got to get 10 yards further up the pitch. Not keen on doing that. Let's stay guarding our own goal. And we played okay for the first month, didn't win. Drew 3, I think, and lost 4. And then, ironically, and this is a situation with the Cups, we have scored, this is a stat for you, we've scored more goals and won more games in Cup competitions this season than we have in the league, which is frightening. Anyway, so so they go through September and they go 5 matches unbeaten in September and everybody thinks, oh, the corner's been turned, things are great. And then they lose 1-0 at Wigan, and it was like somebody had just turned the steering wheel into the ditch and they just went off the rails. And then they did not win another game until, I believe, New Year's Day. I might be wrong in that, but in the league at least. So they didn't win again until New Year's Day, by which time Darren Moore had been sacked. So I think it was that whole idea of losing his best player. He's been in a league where he goes like, oh, Bolton, Huddersfield, Bradford, these are all big teams. These are all teams who could really swat us 4 or 5. So let's play really tight and condensed, because that's how he plays when he's the underdog. And he ends up it ended up being rather stale to watch. They lost 1-0 at home to Plymouth in November, and Talai, who was the guy we sold, scored the winner. And that turned a lot of fans against the manager. Yeah. And he hung on for another month. And the club did an interview with us where they kind of said, well, we thought that the data indicated that he would stay. And the word data to Vale fans is like a swear word. They hate that. They don't want to hear it. So that created more issues. And so as a result of that, I think with Darren, he's a lovely guy. I've interviewed him so many times. Wonderful bloke, really nice guy. Would go out of his way to do anything for you. And I don't just mean like, press interviews and stuff. He'd ring you up and just say, like, oh, you weren't at the press conference today. You okay? And all this, that, and the other. So, really, really nice guy. But I think his tactical limitations come to the fore when he's not got a massive budget for the league he's in. And as a result of that, he becomes much more conservative in his play. And he ends up being a negative manager. And once he gets into that cycle, he can't break it. And that's what ultimately led to him going.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
John Brady jumps off the page to me because when I was a kid, I loved Championship Manager 99-2000, and he played for Rushden and Diamonds, and I always took over Rushden and Diamonds because they had a big budget for the lower leagues, and his name just jumps off the page for me. What's he been like? As a compared to Darren Moore? You said you got on quite well with Darren Moore, but what has he just come in and try to like breathe life into the place, into the squad? Because I was just reading an interview on the BBC website where after the game he was talking about this being probably one of the best groups of players that he's ever managed in nearly 500 games, and you've said he's trying to play a little bit more positively on the pitch and stuff. So has he just come in and tried to breathe life into the place?
Yeah, and he was a little difficult to get to know straight away because I think he's quite wary of saying the right thing and the wrong thing. He's the only manager I've ever sat in his first interviews turned around and started asking me questions instead of me asking him, which was a bit of an eye-opener. But I think the more you go on and the more you get to know him, and he's actually quite a likeable guy. He's quite affable. He's really passionate, and Vale fans love that. One of the things they didn't like about Darren Moore was that he would often be sat on the touchline or stood on the touchline rather, and he'd just have his arms folded, and he'd just be kind of standing there watching it and wouldn't be very animated, whereas Brady is up and down like a bottle of pop all the time, and they love that. And he, in terms of his football, what he has been doing is he clearly came in and said, I want to play with wingers. I want wingers. So Ronan Curtis, who was the only winger at the football club, ended up getting sold a week later, which is such a Port Vale thing to do. But he then has tried to bring in players who can play wide, but it's not a squad built for that. So he in the last week or so, he's gone, do you know what? I'm going to sacrifice my principles and what I want to do to get the best out of the squad. But what I am going to do is improve them mentally, and I'm going to give them more belief and get their attitude to change, which I thought was really interesting, because you get a lot of managers, and you're talking like the guy who's just gone at Man United, Amorim, he wouldn't deviate from 3 at the back to save his life, would he? But this is a manager who's gone and go, this is how I want to play, but I haven't got the players to do it. So what I'm going to do is put them in a shape that isn't the same as the one before. Going to be a little bit more of a tweak. We kind of play with a 10 and 2 strikers rather than wing backs. But what he wants to do is, he says the problem with this lot is that their confidence is on the floor. When they go a goal down, they can't deal with it. He says, so what I'm going to try and do is give them more belief, normalise going a goal down, make it acceptable for them to have setbacks within a game, but teach them how to overcome them, which I think for a coach in the lower leagues is quite surprising, because a lot of it is like, great group, tough game, da-da-da-da-da. But he's actually quite a good student of the game, and will talk to you about where he sees players struggling. I mean, I think one of the first things he did was he said, squad's too big when he came in. I think we had, if you included loan players and players out on loan, we had 32 pros. And I think it's just massive. For a League One side, it's huge. We've got 3 goalkeepers for a start for a League One team that's bottom of the league. And one of them hadn't played since August. So you're like, and he was the one on the longest contract. So it just kind of shows you where the recruitment's been a bit hit and miss. But so what he's done, he's made some uncomfortable decisions. Mitch Clark, who's a really popular player, but of the 3 right backs we got, probably was the one that wasn't going to play. He went, sorry, Mitch, off you go. Went to Fleetwood. Rory Payton, a lad we signed from Scotland, really popular, but doesn't quite fit into the way he wants to play. Packed him off on loan up to St Johnstone. So he's trimmed the squad. He's made it more competitive. He's tried to work with the medical team to get players fitter. But the biggest thing he's done is instill a bit more belief, and to go, right, you are not out of this yet. You're not done. If you go a goal down, it's not the end of the world. And he's also, I know I'm wanging on a bit now, but he's got the best out of the 2 strikers. So Jayden Stockley, who is a big old-fashioned target man, Sunderland fans, if I can liken him to anybody, not on the same level, of course, but he's like a Niall Quinn-esque. He's big, powerful, physical, wins loads in the air, great in your own box at defending set pieces. Legs have kind of gone, but still the type of player you want in the box if you've got a free kick or a corner. And then, as I said earlier, Ben Waine, who earlier on in the season looked absolutely flushed. He couldn't score a goal to save his life. And Brady's given him loads of belief. And he's got 7 goals now, I think. And most of those have come in the last all of them have come since December. So he's found a little bit of a decent one. The only other player I'd just quickly mention is Joe Gauci, the goalkeeper, who's on loan from Villa, who was brought in basically because neither of the other keepers are really comfortable with crosses. And he was really comfortable with crosses, but his kicking was awful when he first came, and he just as likely put it on the bypass as he was to put it in the opposition penalty area. But again, over the last 3 or 4 games, he's been brilliant, and he's clearly been working with Gary Walsh, who's the old Man United keeper, who is our goalkeeping coach. He's been working with him. He's improved his kicking. He's improved his handling. He's improved his shot stopping, and he's been really good as well. So I think what you can see is Brady has got certain players who maybe have got the ability but didn't have the belief, and he's changed them and improved them into being better players as a result.
Something the game slightly than I mentioned earlier about how, because this is really unusual to have one round in the next round like 4 days apart. It just doesn't happen, does it? So it almost feels like league football in that one game's rolling into the next. Do you think that could, like, sort of from a mentality perspective, could that benefit Port Vale? Because you're thinking like, right, we've just come through a really tough game where it went extra time, we won, we celebrated together, it was at home. Now we go 4 days later into another game in the same competition at home again, so the fans are all on board. Do you think that might help?
I think so, because as I said to you, given the way that the fixture backlog is, they're pretty much playing Saturday, Tuesday every week now. And that, if nothing else, is building relationships on the pitch. And I think if you were to look at some of those players, they're like, I want to play. I just want to play now. I've got the taste for it. I don't want a week off. I don't want a week on the training ground. If I'm fit, I want to play. And I think that'll play into it. I think, from what I hear, Sunderland have sold out their allocation, 3,100. I don't think, from what I gather, they're going to get any more than that. So I think that'll be capped off. I would guess, I think Vale, if you add in season ticket holders and, ones they've had in advance already, I think they're talking at about 7,000 home fans, which, given this season is a miracle, really. But that we're obviously, at this point, we're 3 days away from the game as we speak now. So it probably will go up in that time. So I would guess probably 10, 11,000, which when Vale Park has got an atmosphere like that, it shows. And I think the games in which, I don't know if you've ever been to Vale Park, if you've ever seen it in full, it hasn't been full much the last 20 odd, 30 odd years maybe. But when it does get full, it gets loud. And we saw it towards the end of last season, the game when they went top of League Two, when they beat Bromley 5-0, and I think they did a ticket offer, and I think they got 10,000 in, and the place was bouncing. The Arsenal game this year, the place was raucous. They took off. And the game against Gillingham on the last day of last season, even though they lost, but they were in with a chance of going for the title. They were already promoted at that point, and they had 14,000 in, and the place was electric. So it doesn't get full very often, but when it does, it will be good. And I think any Sunderland fan who's going, Bristol City fans turned up the other night and were going, oh, is this a library? And that started the Vale fans off. So the Vale fans won't start on you, but if you start singing at them, they will give it back. So it then becomes this kind of tit for tat as to who's got the biggest chant. And to be fair, at the end of the night, it was the Bristol City fans saying, this is embarrassing, this is embarrassing. And all you could hear was laughter around the other three sides of the stand. So, when the place gets up and running, it'll be great. I think the team want to play. I think they want to really have a go at it. They're relishing the idea of playing a Premier League team and playing in a way that they didn't play against Arsenal when they were a little bit more conservative and defensive. We only got into Arsenal's half twice, which tells you a lot about how that game went. But I think with Brady, they're playing more on the front foot. They've got more belief. And I won't say they're confident of winning the game, but I think they're looking forward to it because they want to go, do you know what? Anything's possible. Let's have a go and see what comes of it.
Well, there'll also be another 3,100 Sunderland fans in the ground as well. So, you talk about there being lots of home fans. When there's lots of away fans that bounce off each other, it should be a proper cup tie, I think. How do you see the game going then? What's your gut feeling?
Well, I think I think it largely depends on how Sunderland approach it, because Vale are not stupid enough to think that we're going to dominate the ball. And John Brady said that the other night. He says, I'm not daft enough to think we're going to have more of the ball against Bristol City. He says, but what we've got to make sure is when we do get the ball, we use it well and we hurt them. So I think he's willing to give up possession. On the flip side of when we do get it, we've got to be quick, we've got to be incisive, we've got to be exactly right with what we do. And I think he did that the other night. I think if Sunderland turn up and maybe go, again, about it's how seriously they take it. If they rock up I'm not saying they will, if they rock up and they play maybe, a couple of 18-year-olds or put out a few second stringers and Vale sniff that they're not taking it seriously, I think they'll grow in confidence. I think if Sunderland take it seriously, score the first goal, that confidence might be a bit fragile and then they could probably go on and get another. But this is a different Vale than a month ago, and they seem more confident. I think they've got players who are in form. They've got players who love the opportunity to have a go at them. And as I say, it's all part of that belief. It's all part of, this is a team that would go a goal down before Christmas and would just look like the world had fell on top of them. Whereas now they went a goal down against Reading the other week, and it was almost like it was injustice. It was kind of like, you've scored against us. And they battered him for the next hour and scored a last-minute equaliser, but it felt like a win. And they've kind of carried that on. So I think it'd be cagey. I think Vale will be quite happy to give up possession to Sunderland. They'll be quite comfortable defensively. Connor Hall, who's at the left of the back three, is at the minute playing really good good football. He's good in the air. He's winning a lot. The only question is who he picks at the back. Kyle John, who's our captain, who's a fullback we got from Everton, is great. He's the type of player, if you want in the lower league, wins everything, throws himself into tackles, doesn't let players get past him. Brilliant. Not the most vocal, and he's only 24, and he's the captain. But what he is, he's clearly a leader by example. And, him and Connor Hall, Cameron Humphreys, who was the other central defender, and Gauchi in goal have kind of got an understanding now. So they're quite tight at the back, and they'll say to Sunderland, right, if you've got the ball, break us down. If, on the other hand, you give it away, we've got players who are full of confidence going forward, and we'll take you on, and we'll try and get the better of you. So, yeah, it should be interesting. I don't think it'll be a boring game, let's put it that way.
Do you do score predictions or not?
I try and stay away from it. Well, they used to make me do this on Radio Stoke the season we were going up. And I'd always say, Vale should win today, and we'd lose or draw. So in the end, I just got to the point of doing ludicrous ones. So towards the end of the season, right, you're at home to Bromley today. What's the score going to be? And I'd just go 5-5, knowing it wouldn't be right. So yes, I'll do a score. I will do one though, because I think this game merits one. So if I'm going to, I've got a sneaky feeling. Head says maybe Sunderland to win it 2-1. Heart would maybe say take it to extra time and then penalties, and then who knows. Ooh. But yeah, I think it's. I think Sunderland might just have a little bit too much for him, but I don't think Vale will disgrace themselves.
Well, it's all set up to be a really exciting day. I mean, if I was a neutral, I'd be tuning in this game.
Yeah.
As a Sunderland fan, I'm a little bit more nervous, but yeah, looking forward to this one. But good luck for the rest of the season. Looking at the table, it's not impossible. Sunderland have overcame something similar in the past. When Gus Poyet was Sunderland manager, everybody had us written off with 6-7 games to go, and we pulled off the great escape. You've got a little bit more time than that, so who knows there. But good luck for the rest of the season, Phil, and other than, of course, on Sunday.
Yeah, same to you. Good luck. I hope so. I love watching Sunderland when they play. When I watch them on Match of the Day or see any of the games live, I love watching them play, because I just love watching them having a real good go at teams and not having any fear. And, I've not actually been to the Stadium of Light. It's one of the grounds I want to go to, mainly because we've never been in the same league as you for as long as I've been doing this. But I'd love to go, but it's it's an atmosphere I love watching. And, I love watching them in the Premier League, and I just think that's a proper club, and I'm not doing this to blow smoke, but I'm like, I'd like to see them do well, win a cup, not this year, obviously, but, win a cup, get in there, just not be that type of team where people go, oh, well, Sunderland are the underdogs today. No, go, Sunderland are going to win something. They're going to beat you today because they're a good side, and, fair dues. And I hope the rest of the season goes brilliantly for you. So, yeah, apart from Sunday.
Well, thank you very much, mate. Thanks to the listeners for joining us. We will be back with a match day preview tomorrow, so make sure you tune in for that. And from us, bye for now.